You're listening to the ESO Network, your station for all things geek.
Hello, please let me see your ticket stubs for the Double-Edged Double Bill. This week we witnessed Batman v Superman v Harley Quinn, Birds of Justice, or the Fantabulous Emancipation of the DCEU. Each week, Adam Thomas and Thomas Mariani will come to the table to discuss the randomly selected yin and yang of a double feature. Then, both will have to pick a number between 1 and 10 in order to seal their fates for the next episode. One will have 2 good movies, the other 2 bad ones. Let the chaos begin. I am Thomas Mariani, and I'm here to report a terrible crime.
And I am Adam Tom Martha.
Why'd you say that name?
Jody's gonna kill Martha.
Which Martha is? Is that the one from Smallville, the one from Gotham, or is the one over on Mulberry Lane? I'm not sure which Martha you're referring to.
Washington.
Oh, yes, of course.
Yes. Welcome,
everybody, to the Double-Edged Double Bill for our ridiculous antics here. Or maybe they're not ridiculous, I'm sorry, but they're more visionary, depending on who's directing them.
Mm-hmm.
We are here to talk about 2 films, as we do every week. If you're new, Adam and I discuss a double feature based on selections we made at the end of the previous episode. We have a good movie and a bad movie, though I guess those are relative depending on who you talk to about especially these movies. We're specifically talking about the DC Extended Universe, which, if you're unaware, is basically for DC Comics the recent continuity. So that would include 8 films, which would be Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, Suicide Squad, Wonder Woman, Justice League, Aquaman, Birds of Prey, Shazam, and the upcoming Wonder Woman 1984, which is why we're talking here this evening, because that is coming out this very week on Christmas Day on HBO Max, which has a lot of interesting connotations for the future of movies. But, Adam, we talked about DC movies in general. We've done 2 episodes about DC Comics adaptations, but we haven't talked about any films from this specific subset, this continuity, that was sort of invented to kind of catch up with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And what are your thoughts on this sort of franchise?
I think it's exactly what you just said. It was completely created to catch up with the Marvel Universe. I think it's starting to hit its stride now in the later sort of half of the films. But it was tonally just a fucking mess in the beginning. It was all over the place, clearly rushed out, clearly just like, what actors can we get to be these roles? Suicide Squad's probably a big example of that. You know, it's getting better. It's still not great, but it is getting better.
I mean, I would argue at least a couple of films have been pretty close to, if not great.
I said the later movies, Thomas. I agree with you.
Well, even then, it's not consistent. I definitely agree with that. It's definitely sort of this mixed bag of cinematic universe thing. It's probably the textbook example to me of, at least in the modern trend of trying to catch up to Marvel and do a cinematic universe, of one at least actually existing, which is fair to this, because there are plenty of examples of studios trying to make one, and it doesn't work. It doesn't even go past one movie, necessarily. See The Dark Universe.
Yeah.
With at least, like, the DC Universe, they have enough clout to at least say, like, hey, we're basing this off superheroes that, one, are pretty famous in general, but also have had successful movies before, given we started with Superman and Batman was involved. And then we kind of spread out to other things that hadn't been adapted into movies before. And I'll say, if nothing else, I think, say what you will about the Snyder movies, and we will talk about at least one of them later in this episode. But those movies, most of those movies at the very least, feel like they're kind of, the director's actual vision. I will say this series sort of has this weird, like, bottom tier and higher tier, where, like, at its highest, it's like, oh, this is a director getting to do the exact vision they want to do and doing a pretty great job at it. And at the bottom tier, some of these aren't even fucking movies. Like, some of them don't feel like completed films because they have so much studio meddling. Which I can say, no other, like, even Marvel at their worst is kind of like, oh, you can see some studio hand, but it's kind of forgettable. as opposed to, I would argue at least one of these movies is bottom tier. Like, this is not complete. Finish the assignment. You did not complete this.
Yes. I agree. And, and they also took the step to start lightening the tone. Because you got to figure, look at Man of Steel and our topic for tonight and the first couple movies. They were dead-ass serious movies.
Right. To kind of stick out from the sort of funnier Marvel stuff. Yeah.
Right. And then you got to figure with Aquaman, Shazam, and even some Wonder Woman, the original, there was some levity started to being brought into it, which really sort of lends itself to the subject material quite a bit more than making it just super, like, we're brooding all the time. Every single person in this universe is dark and brooding.
Well, I would agree with that. I would also argue that at least some of them, the worser ones to me, tend to be the ones where it's like the movie is pretty much done and was already sort of in a darker tone, and they're like, fix it, fix it, fix it, fix it. And it's like, no, that doesn't work. I think that makes a worse movie if you try and make an already pretty much done movie into a lighter tone with scenes that don't fit.
Are we talking Suicide Squad here, mostly?
Not just Suicide Squad. I would also argue at least Justice League has that immense problem.
Oh, all over the place. My man.
My man.
Oh.
Booyah.
Oh, and the Flash gets nuzzled in between Wonder Woman's breasts. That's a whole thing that
And
happens.
he says Dostoevsky to a bunch of Russians.
Yep, because that's something that's necessary. Before we get into it, the thing is, too, about the DCEU especially, their two flagship characters are the most famous comic book characters ever created, with Superman and Batman.
Right.
I mean, you could show the Superman symbol or the Batman symbol, I'd argue almost anywhere in the world, and people would know exactly what it is and what it represents.
It's like it's recognizable iconography, if nothing else.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, of course, it's been marketed to death, too. At their core, they're not that complex of characters. It should be kind of a no-brainer and easy to pull off on film. But maybe the simplicity, I guess, is what makes it such a problem. I don't know. It's just, woof.
I think we'll definitely talk about that with especially our bad feature here. But I think the big thing for me is sort of like, I've said this before when we talked about the general DC adaptations. In terms of my limited comic book reading, I've read a lot more DC stuff in general, like Superman and Batman specifically, just because I'm a pleb, I guess, to some degree, in terms of the comic book actually reading world. But at the very least, I do agree that I think there have been really great examples of kind of like contextualizing these characters and doing interesting things with them, and I think even at some of these worser movies, they at least kind of try to do that. But at the same time, kind of like recontextualizing these characters also doesn't work for building like a universe or a franchise or anything like that you're trying to also do at the same time. It's this weird thing of like trying to kind of make an interesting statement with characters that are very familiar, but also kind of trying to make something appealing to mass audiences. And I think they kind of have both those masters are tugging at, and a lot of these movies don't quite work in appeasing that in the earlier cases, and then as it went along, they did a better job of balancing that out.
Sure.
we'll get into that, and we also want to emphasize, because obviously we're on the ESO network, our lovely podcast hosting network here, and a lot of people listening are sort of geeky listeners, and we want to emphasize that like these movies have very big fans, especially the Snyder ones. They have rather ravenous, loving, attentive fans that can be maybe a bit defensive. And we want to say firmly, we're going to say some things maybe negatively you don't agree with, or even oppositely, we're going to say positive things about a movie you probably don't have a lot of positive feelings toward, depending on your perspective. And we just want to emphasize that if you like some of the things we don't like, that's great. And if you don't like some of the things we like, that's also great. Just like, don't be a dick.
I also want to reiterate, this is coming from two guys, one who's a major film, well, we're both film fans, but I'd argue you're more of a film sort of, I don't know, nerd than I am. You're more of a film dork than I am. And I grew up reading these comics, these comics were my life growing up. So we're both coming at it from very sort of precise opinions on it. But yeah, they're just our opinions. That's it.
Right. So we'll go ahead and say that we're going to be talking about two specific movies today. First, we'll be talking about our good pick, the most recent entry prior to the upcoming Wonder Woman 1984, which was your pick, Adam, for a good pick of Birds of Prey. And then we talk about my bad pick, which was Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. So we'll have a lot to say about both of these, and let's kick things off with Birds of Prey and the fantabulous emancipation of one Harley Quinn.
This is our story.
They have my diamond. I think you can manage a couple girls.
Like a villain, I pop it and then I reload. Oh, please. If he gets a diamond, you'll be unstoppable.
It is not gonna happen.
I like it when you call me crazy, long as you keep calling, baby. Nothing gets a guy's attention like violence. Yeah.
Harley Quinn in Birds of Prey. Rated R. Experience it in IMAX.
So, Birds of Prey, and its longer title, came out earlier this year, February 7th, 2020, which feels like centuries ago. I remember seeing this in the theater, what feels like so long ago. It is from Kathy Yan, who's the director, and is a spin-off movie about Harley Quinn, who is a character that started originally in the Batman the Animated Series in the 90s, and then made her film debut in live action in Suicide Squad, as played by Margot Robbie. And Margot Robbie, after that movie's surprising success, was like, oh great, how about I take this cachet and make a Harley Quinn sort of spin-off team movie, which she's a big producer on this and was like sort of shepherding this project through. And, we might have a lot of negative thoughts about Suicide Squad, but we can say at the very least, Birds of Prey is a very different animal.
Yes. Absolutely. I would equivalent Suicide Squad to, if we're talking beer, Busch Light. And I would call Birds of Prey a Corona.
That's really insulting to Busch Light, that you would compare it to Suicide Squad.
Well, no, okay, fine. Natural ice.
Still very kind. I don't think most beers can really compare to... Suicide Squad feels like drinking like straight Axe body spray.
That's what Steel Reserve basically is.
Sure.
You don't want Steel Reserve.
We'll go with that. We'll talk about Suicide Squad maybe a bit later when we get to our feedback section. But for Birds of Prey, Adam, this was your choice, as we mentioned. And so I'm very curious why this one in particular.
Well, mainly because I expected it to suck. Because as we talked about, I was just really, really dislike Suicide Squad. So I expected this to be no good. It got sort of like, constantly pushed around its release date, then the title change, and within a week, it went from the full title, just Birds of Prey at the show. So I'm like, oh, that doesn't bode well. The advertising was everywhere, blah, 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 blah. And then I finally watched it, and I was actually really pleasantly surprised. I think it's a very, very strong sort of female character-led piece with a really compelling, fun villain. And it's not a crazy sort of giant ray in the sky superhero movie. It's just like a crime movie and hijinks and shenanigans. It's nothing really supernatural or wild. It's just a bunch of crazy shit happening. And I thought it was really fun.
It's a smaller scale sort of action comedy, which I agree, I think is a welcome sort of change of pace. Even like as good as these movies could be, like with a Wonder Woman or Shazam, those are definitely higher budgeted movies. And I like that even though this is like $90 million is the budget, it does feel a lot more sort of like located, especially to like the shittier areas of Gotham. And I love sort of this kind of side story that like while you hear brief bits about like, oh yeah, Batman's around or there's a Superman, we're just covering like all the people in the real shithole areas of the city. That's supposed to be like a major metropolitan area. And I really love especially how Kathy Yan kind of creates the world of the crime leagues of Gotham, in that everybody has sort of like a highfalutin kind of over-the-top personality, kind of like a Harley Quinn, but also all of them are kind of like petty, shitty little thugs. And I think that's kind of fun that they really emphasize fully on that in this feature.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I love that, the main villain, Ewan McGregor's Black Mask, is just kind of a narcissistic psychopath.
He's a fucking child with a gun, basically.
Yeah, basically. He's a spoiled rich kid with a gun. And I like that he's really infallible. He's not super tough or anything like that. I love most of the supporting cast. I'm not huge on Mary Elizabeth Winstead. I think she's trying to be at the level that everyone else is, and she's not quite hitting it. At least on the level of like Ewan McGregor and Margot Robbie, and I don't think she is capable, at least in this film, of pulling that off. She's a much more sort of, well, we know she's like a subdued indie darling actress, you know. So she's kind of my weakest link in it, but that's not to say she's bad. I just don't think she's uh, got the gusto that the rest do. I absolutely fucking love Rosie Perez in this movie. I think she's phenomenal. What a cool thing to see Rosie Perez come, not only like sort of revitalizing her career, but in a mainstream sort of blockbuster type film. Really, really cool.
And also casually playing a lesbian character. And it's not a huge deal.
Right. At all. It's
Yeah.
barely even, the only way it's referenced is because you meet her ex.
Right, Ali Wong is sort of the DA's assistant.
I agree, because they could have gone really silly with that, with her constantly like oogling Margot Robbie or whatever, like everyone did in Suicide Squad, which like they made you do in Suicide Squad, because the movie should have just been called Margot Robbie's Ass, featuring Will Smith. But yeah, they didn't do any of that in this. They, you know, and I like the costume choices they did for Harley Quinn, where it's just weird, bizarre shit, not necessarily even attractive clothing. It's just goofy shit that you would get the idea that this psychopath would wear.
But it's like she has a sexuality to her, but it's not like the one main feature. It's just like it's something Harley owns, but also she's like a fuck up. Like I love the bit in the middle of this big club scene where she like vomits in the middle of the montage into a handbag.
Mm-hmm. When she jumps on that one dude's legs.
Yes.
Like, it's fucking crazy. But no, I think that's one of the reasons I really liked it, because I was honestly expecting basically Suicide Squad Part 2, but with all female. That's what I was expecting, and that's not what they give you at all.
No, yeah, I like the fact that they sort of build this team, and I think all the characters feel very different. Like, even with the Mary Elizabeth Winstead thing, I would argue very much she is not trying at all to be like an Ewan McGregor or Rosie Perez or any of the other characters, because what I really like about her character is that she's extremely awkward as, like, this woman who was raised as an assassin after her family was killed, and I like the fact that they own the fact that she's extremely awkward around people. And I've even seen some people say, oh, it's kind of like she might be on the autism spectrum to some degree, and I can see that, and I think that's what really works, is that anytime she kind of tries to be involved with the team, it's through her own kind of awkward prism that she can't quite get past. Like, even the whole Huntress thing, everyone calls her the crossbow killer. She's like, God damn it, I'm not that. I'm trying to establish my own identity, and you're all trying to put this on me. I think she's really fun in this, and I think she really fits with the ensemble in general. If anything, I would say my biggest problem with the movie is that I like Margot Robbie a lot as Harley Quinn, but earlier on in the movie, when it's more of just like the Harley show, it kind of shows how thin, sort of as a character on her own, Harley can be. Because, like, I loved her in the old Batman animated series, but I think what works with Harley is when she has somebody to bounce off of, like, wonderfully with, like, Poison Ivy in that show, or the recent animated series, with, like, where she has a bunch of other people in her crew as well. Once she has, like, a straight person to, like, go off of as a comedic partner, like, especially when we get to, like, Black Canary as played Janae Smollett Bell, I think, like, that stuff really works. Or when she ends up Cassandra Cain, as played by L.A. J. Basco.
Oh, yeah, no, I think their interaction's really good. I like Harley and Kane, because it's like, Kane is just like this little lost kid, doesn't really belong to anybody, doesn't feel like she fits in, and she meets this maniac, and she, like, wants to be her. Real, like, oh, you're so fucking cool, but then Harley, like, basically tells her to fuck off, and, you know, it's a really cute sort of friendship relationship they have.
Almost feels like a surrogate big sister kind of thing with the two of them.
Yes, I agree.
But would you agree maybe that, like, when it's earlier with Harley on her own, it feels a bit more, like, it gets a bit thin after a certain point?
Yeah, I do agree. I think that whole part of the movie is when she's, like, trying to get the egg sandwich, and then it all fucks up, and then all these people are coming after her in one quick scene.
That's when the movie kicks off for me as well, I agree.
Absolutely. It's really fun and exciting, but up until then, yeah, it's kind of like meanders. You're like, okay, let's get going. Let's get the team together, or whatever we're going to do then, because, yeah, it does get a little old after a while.
The egg sandwich thing is so phenomenal, because they really, like, lovingly pay attention to, like, Harley is so dead set. Like, she doesn't have much in her life, clearly, at this point, because she's broken up with Joker, doesn't have, like, a lot of connections with other people. At this point, she has a hard time opening up to people and getting emotionally, like, tethered to people, that she has to get tethered to, like, a fucking egg sandwich, which is so funny. And the way that, to be fair, Kat, at the end shoots, like, especially the making of that sandwich, it's like, I get it, girl. Like, that looks great.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. Every time I watch this movie, I'm like, oh my God, I want that fucking sandwich. Absolutely agree.
And even the fact that it's like, I love also the detail of, like, it's being made by, like, a guy who's in a really shitty fucking like cooking place.
Like a little shitty bodega. Yeah, a little shitty bodega.
Yeah, and she emphasizes just like, oh, maybe it's because his cheese slices are just 6 months out of date. But maybe that's what makes it so great.
But like I said, I really do like Ewan McGregor as Black Mask. I think he's fucking phenomenal. And the same thing too, they play with his sexuality without coming right out and saying it.
Yeah, with particularly Chris Messina as Victor Zsasz.
Yeah, he's also really good in it too. But Ewan McGregor, when he's showing her Black Canary the stuff, and he's like, "Oh, these are shrunken heads," and he's like, "Ugh, isn't that gross?" Like, he's so fucking good in it. He's so good.
And then when he looks at the giant statue he has of himself in the middle of the fucking
I know. Or when the girl's hanging upside down, he's gonna let her go, and then she blows a snot bubble.
Yes.
And he's like, "Oh God, just forget it."
I changed my mind.
Good Lord. Yeah. But no, they're really fun. They got a fun dynamic. Chris Messina is genuinely kind of intimidating in this movie because he is fucking stone-faced scary.
Right, I like the fact that earlier on they play him as a bit more comedic in the line with everybody else, and it works, because it's just like, where the fuck was the Rock? I just had it on me. And then later on when he's like showing Harley the scars and shit, just like, I have this place safe for you. It's like, oh shit. Ooh, this is getting serious.
Oh yeah, he's a fucking nutbag.
Right.
For sure. What did you feel about the final sort of carnival house sort of action scene?
I like all of the action pretty consistently in this movie. I think I that's the thing, is even when I have some issues with like the comedic elements, I think Kathy Yan does such a great job of building a lot of these action sequences really well. That's not my favorite action set piece necessarily in the Funhouse. I think it's a lot of fun. I would say my favorite action set piece is like Harley in the police station, going through, especially in the evidence locker when she's like fucking destroying people's legs and shit. So good. But even in like the big action set piece, I like the fact that at the end they have all the different members of this sort of Birds of Prey posse have their own different fighting styles, and they all work to like fight off all these various different thugs in different ways. I think that's what makes this a strength. Then also the production design of the Funhouse and stuff like that. But I'm a sucker for like a Funhouse sequence in general in a movie. Yeah, I thought it worked pretty well, as much as any of the other action did in the movie.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I've read a lot of stuff, because I'm very learned, where people are sort of like, it just kind of drags on a little too much, or it's maybe too slapsticky in scenes or whatever. And maybe that is the case with certain moments, but it never feels that way to me, because the sort of action photography and direction in this movie is really fucking well done. Like, it's really, really good. And that's a problem that a lot of the DCEU movies have, where they don't really show it to you. It's too choppy. It's too much close-up work.
Also, it's way too murky with the look of it.
Yeah, too dark, way too shrouded, way too everything. And this, it's like kind of right in your face. You can see every hit, everything that's happening. And for me, that just makes it so much more enjoyable.
Well, I think what kind of, like, I've heard Kathy Ann say this as much, like, her kind of goal was to sort of turn the Joel Schumacher aesthetic into a more, like, well-realized project, and I think that's what I like about it. Because, like, with those Joel Schumacher Batman movies, as much as they do have a lot of issues, I think the production design is fun, and I think this movie decides, like, okay, we're going to take inspiration from that, but also make a good movie around the elaborate, silly production design. And I think that's where this movie excels so hard. It's just being, like, a big, massive, fun, sprightly movie, but also having a bit of the grounded darkness in a way that fits, like, Gotham as a setting. I think they balance that out perfectly in this movie.
And this Gotham feels like the nicest part of Gotham is Chinatown. And the rest is just bitch. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I really love the look of it. I love the sort of bright daytime stuff. It's not a perfect movie. It's not even my favorite of the DCEU. But I do think this is one that got a lot of shade thrown at it for really no reason, especially without people seeing it first. And because I can attest to that. I threw shade at it. I thought it was going to fucking suck. Then I saw it, and I'm like, oh, no, this is good.
Yeah, I think some of it has to definitely do with, like, we mentioned Suicide Squad, despite being a really big earner at the time, was kind of viewed as a disappointment from critics and even fans to a certain degree, despite how many Harley Quinn outfits we saw, like, that Halloween. And I think it just kind of came after having a bit of a bad taste when, like, people were starting to get back onto the DCEU with, like, Wonder Woman and Shazam. Then this shows up big and just like, oh, are we reminding of, like, a Bad X? There's a bit of that, and also then just a bit of, like, general fanboy sexism bullshit as well.
What?
I know,
Did that happen?
I gotta sit you down, Adam. It's a true thing.
No. Are you telling fanboys can be sexist, awful people? Well, I'm going to take my katana and trilby and go home.
Does it have the soul of your victims?
Yes, it does, m'lady.
This is Adam. His fedora has the soul of his ex-husband in it.
Yes. Oh, God. Oh, stupid. I get being beholden to source material, and I get being, thinking comic book characters and that are very important, because they are important. They're important to the kids who grew up with them. They're important for all the messages they can convey. They're important just on a medium of art alone. But the thing is, you have to let it change and gestate and move and, allow it to become another form of media. It's not going to be the same. It can't be. It's impossible. If it was the same, it'd be boring. So let it change, let things move. You'll still have the comic book. You'll still have the source material. Like, who gives a shit? If they change something and you don't like it, you still have what you fell in love with to begin with. But people want these movies and they clamor for them and oh my God, I can't believe they're making this movie. And then if it's not exactly the material you read, this is bullshit. They're making it different so it'll make money to appeal to a bigger audience, and then you will get more of those movies.
Also, they're trying to tell their own fucking story, and I don't think anyone can blame them for, trying to adapt a fucking story to a different medium.
Who the fuck wants to see the live-action version of The Dark Knight Returns? Honestly. Everyone knows the story. You've seen it, you read it, you've seen the animated version. You want a live-action version too? Which they kind of gave us in our next feature, and it sucked. You don't need a retelling of your favorite stories.
Well, I even know, because, Birds of Prey, apparently, it has, Batgirl in it and stuff in the modern incarnations, so this doesn't quite fit that particular team, right?
No, in the original the original team was Huntress, Oracle, and I think Batgirl, but it was Oracle was the original Barbara Gordon.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that was the original Birds of Prey. It was the three of them. Harley Quinn was never even in Birds of Prey.
No, right, and even a Harley Quinn, where I knew Harley Quinn for so long as obviously Joker's gangster mall, basically. And that's where I started really being invested in that character. And admittingly, with that animated series, as much as I love it, they kind of tried to keep Harley Quinn to a status quo in the middle of an abusive relationship with Joker, which probably isn't necessarily the best thing to do with a female character. And I like the idea of Harley going out on her own and being her own character, kind of distancing herself from the Joker a bit. If anything, the biggest sort of hindrance this movie has for me is just the fact that that animated series I mentioned has come out since I've watched it since, and I'm oh my God, this is even better to me. I can't emphasize enough. If you have HBO Max, watch that Harley Quinn show. I love it. There's I have some problems with it, but it's mostly just kind of such a fun, inventive, new way of doing things with that character and a bunch of other great DC side characters.
Yeah, I didn't watch all of it. I watched quite a bit of it though. But dude, Kite Man, what the fuck? This is awesome. King Shark.
Oh, I love Ron Funches as King Shark is so fucking fun.
He's so funny. But yeah, I can't agree with you more. I think that show is absolutely just gangbusters, nuts, and so fun. It's so fun. It is. Do not watch it with the kiddies.
No.
I can tell you that much.
It's very R-rated as a show. And this one also is R-rated. I think some people even said that might have been a hindrance for it making as much money as it potentially could have done. Do you think that's true, Adam?
I think it should have stayed R-rated. The thing is, that's not a viable excuse anymore, where, it won't make money because it's R-rated. Look at Deadpool. Look at Logan. Look at Deadpool 2. I mean...
Look at Joker that came out several months prior to this.
Look at Joker. Right, exactly. The fans of this shit, they're adults too. And a lot of them are adults, the ones that grew up with it. They'll pay to go see an R-rated version. They don't give a shit. They just want to go see a good movie. If your whole goal is for kids, then yeah, then you got to neuter it and change it. I get that. But it doesn't make sense anymore that it won't make as much money if it's R-rated. That doesn't make sense. I don't believe that's the case really at all.
And plus, you wouldn't have some of the more fun, elaborate, great sequences. I mentioned the police sequence and how some of those Bibles, particularly the one guy who Harley Quinn kicks his leg in one opposite direction and kicks it back in the other direction. You couldn't do that in a PG-13 movie.
Oh, absolutely.
No, or even of course the Ewan McGregor's death in this movie, which is phenomenal. It just fucking explodes off the pier. It's so perfectly timed.
But even that police station scene, the thing is, it's not gory at all. I mean, other than the limb breaking, but there's no blood or anything. I mean, she's shooting the cops with paint bags and glitter and stuff like that.
A good decision, because I don't want to see a villain shoot up a place, regardless of where it is right now.
But the thing is, this is a good movie you could show your teenager. Mm-hmm. You don't have to take a fucking 7-year-old to see it. But it is approachable enough from a lot of different age ranges.
I think the most R-rated element of that sequence is probably Harley getting a sort of cocaine power-up, which is so fun.
Yeah.
A big thing this improves upon with Suicide Squad, the needle drops in this movie are perfect. I love the soundtrack so much.
Yes.
Particularly, the use of Barracuda during the climax, I think is great.
Mm-hmm. I agree, yeah, especially in comparison to Suicide Squad. Good.
I don't know, I was watching this in the first 18 minutes, I'm like, how come we haven't had 10 soundtrack cues? Come on, guys. Pick up the pace.
Where's the credence? Need more credence.
Where's 30 seconds of Credence, followed by 30 seconds of The Animals, followed by 30 seconds of another band?
Oh my god. Constantly. But anyways, to sort of wrap up on this one, I at least for me, I do think it's really fun. Like I said, it's not my favorite DCEU movie. If I had to pick one, it'd probably be Shazam. I really, really love Shazam. I think it's, just super wholesome and fun. But this is a really good, entertaining movie. Comic book movie or not, it's really super fun. And I think it did get an unfair shake a lot because of sort of the Suicide Squad stigma. But I challenge people to watch this ones who never gave it a shot. And I mean, you might not like it, it might not be for you, but I guarantee it'll be better than you expected.
Right, and if you didn't like it, don't do a 3-hour YouTube video about why it sucks and why it didn't do well because DC's questioning male excellence or whatever bullshit you want to do.
Yeah, well, that's why we get the Snyder Cut. Woohoo!
Oh, God. We'll talk about that a bit further later. But yeah, I agree that I think it's not my favorite of the DCEU, but I like the fact that DC's able to do something like Wonder Woman, which is great, empowering, positive sort of use of a female main character. And it was also able to have a bunch of female characters who are kind of shitty people, but at the same time they have more complex, interesting stories that you can tell. Despite that, I like the fact that DCU is able to play with that, and I hope, despite the fact that this was kind of a disappointment for them at making $200 million on that $90 million budget, I hope it doesn't at least kind of scare them away from doing fun things like this, and I hope we don't say get rid of Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn, because I love seeing her in these things, and I'm excited to see her in the Suicide Squad, mainly because this movie did such a great job of really bring her into her own as a character, and also having her balance up a bunch of other great characters. I'd love to see this Birds of Prey sort of cast continue on from here in the DC universe, because it's such a fun, vibrant, enjoyable action comedy movie where even if the comedy isn't as consistent, like I said, the action is so phenomenal that it's just this is still just such a consistently entertaining ride. And also, like you mentioned, Ewan McGregor, such a fun villain. It's one that I agree, I think people should give more of a chance out there. If even if you're not a big comic book fan, you might just it's oh, this is a fun, entertaining action comedy movie. And nothing else. Also, just one brief shout out. We didn't mention much about the whole rollerblading Harley Quinn sequence with the cars. That movement is also really fucking dope. I love that bit.
That might be my favorite action beat, to be honest. It's so well done.
Yeah, lots of great stuff. Credit to Chad Stahelski of the John Wick movies, who was the big stunt choreographer for the movie as well. But let's go ahead and we have a whole other movie to talk extensively about here in a second. But first, here's a promo for an ESO so you can queue up right after ours.
I'm Drew Leiter.
And I'm Cletus Jacobs.
Join us this winter as we watch changes in the DC Universe unfold. We'll keep you informed on DC News, we'll review the future state event, and of course, we'll be talking the Arrowverse shows when they return this January.
Thanks for letting us be a part of your DC Comics journey, and thanks for listening to the Earth Station DCU podcast.
Part of the ESO Network.
All right, and here we go, everybody. Our bad feature, Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice.
Next time they shine your light in the sky, don't go to it. The bat is dead. Well, here I am.
And now,
We will battle.
Stay down! You're not brave.
Rated PG-13.
So, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice came out March 25th, 2016, from director Zack Snyder. So this was the second film in the DCEU, following up directly debut of Henry Cavill's Superman in Man of Steel, which, Adam, we've talked a bit off mic. Let's briefly at least establish, you were a fan of Man of Steel, especially when it came out, right?
Oh, yeah. Yes, still am. I still really like it. I think it has flaws. I'm not going to sit here and say it's a perfect movie, but I think it's a really, really sort of good Superman movie. It's a good origin Superman movie. That movie, to me, it is dark and everything, but I like the idea that Superman would become the Superman we all know after these events of this movie, which obviously we didn't get. We got Batman vs Superman and Dawn of Justice.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't mention this earlier, but in prep for this show, I rewatched all 8 of these movies. Yes, I did. And I did rewatch Man of Steel. That was a movie I liked a lot more at the time when it came out, and I think I've watched it one time right before Batman v Superman came out, and then right now before, obviously, the show earlier this week. And I'll say that, like, I have a lot of problems still with Man of Steel, but I will at least say that one feels like the most sort of, like, mixed bag of an individual movie of these movies, because I love certain elements of it. I think particularly the first half of that movie does a pretty great job of establishing like a new version of Krypton, and Kal-El coming down to Earth and kind of having these difficulties with adjusting to Earth, and it has some of the better examples of Henry Cavill as Superman. I think particularly sort of like the interrogation scene he has with Amy Adams as Lois Lane, or some of the other sequences where it's even him kind of doing a Incredible Hulk TV series, kind of going around trying to find his way. I think that stuff is pretty interesting and complex, and I just think the movie really gradually shits the bed by doing a whole fucking Dragon Ball Z ending that I'm not a fan of.
No, I do agree with that. I agree the ending is a little much. I don't know that Zod needed to be the first villain in the new Superman franchise.
Despite Michael Shannon doing a pretty good job, I liked what he did in that movie.
I really liked him in it, but it's the same thing. It's to me, it's, Tony Iron Man versus Ironmonger. It's the same idea where it's like the two equally powered super people have this big blowout fight. It just, you get lost in the destruction and lost in the spectacle. I'd like to see something a little bit, A, you can follow visually, and B, have a little more punch to it than instead of, oh, these guys are super tough and they hit each other so hard. Like, who cares? So, I remember after Man of Steel coming out, and I was really excited, as a lot of people were like, they're going to start the DCEU with this. This is fucking cool. Like, where could we go from here? And I expected, over anything, a sequel to Man of Steel. I did not expect Batman to be brought back in so fast. And I'll never forget when they showed the logo. I think it was at Comic-Con.
Yeah, just a couple months after Man of Steel came out, the San Diego Comic-Con, just like Zack Snyder, like, hey everybody, hope you like Man of Steel, and oh, by the way, one more thing, and they show the logo.
Yeah, and it looks like the world's finest logo.
Yes.
Which I'm like, okay, so we're gonna do like a team up thing. All right, and then it's Batman versus Superman. I'm like, oh, I don't know that this is the way to go. And then I saw the trailers. I'm like, oh, this is a bad idea. Bruce Wayne in Batman vs Superman is Lex Luthor. His whole reason for wanting to stop Superman and kill Superman is Lex Luthor's modus operandi in the comics. You have to take it at the 1% chance that this person turns on us. You have to take it as a certainty, because he will kill us all. So we have to stop him. That's not Batman. That's Lex Luthor. That's always been Lex Luthor.
Right.
Lex Luthor believes his doing is right. Batman knows how to kill Superman, and he always has a contingency plan in his back pocket, but he has that for every fucking buddy in the DC universe, period. It just... And then Jesse Eisenberg...
Well, hold on. I want to at least, like...
I'm all over the place. I know I'm all over the place.
What, for Batman v Superman? That feels so thematically inappropriate.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, but like I agree that in general I think that's a problem, but I will say, as sort of motivation for within this universe that was established as Man of Steel, where you have this like big elaborate fight that with Zod versus Superman that literally turned into like a 9/11 imagery thing. Like, I get why a Batman would have maybe trepidations about Superman, in this fucking universe after that happens.
I don't disagree with you. I agree that Batman would be like, this motherfucker killed God knows how many people in this slugfest in Metropolis. And I agree that Batman would like be a detective and try to figure out who the fuck he is and what's going on and try to solve it.
And a credit to the movie, I think the opening sequence is probably one of the better examples of like what they were kind of going for with this, where within that spectrum, like Bruce Wayne seeing through the rubble, seeing people like horribly just scarred and killed and all this other stuff. I think that's a good way to lead off, at least, that like he would have these trepidations and motivate him to search after Superman from there.
Well, I agree with that, and that's the way they could have gone. Instead of him, literally, they given him Lex Luthor's identity. He had enough reason already. But then once they get into the thing where he has to kill him, and he's wanting to find kryptonite, and he's wanting to do this, and that's not being a detective. That's just being a revenge monster.
Right. I think that's the problem, is like, I think early on, even after that sequence I'm talking about, they have like some interesting scenes of him having those trepidations that feel a bit more complex. I think some of the best scenes are earlier on with like Ben Affleck and Jeremy Irons as Alfred, kind of like talking about this situation and how many like trepidations he has, and kind of focusing on the embitterness he would have, especially being like a 50-year-old or so Batman. I think she's like, okay, you're actually doing more complex things than I expected, Zack Snyder, great. And then the moment he has that speech you're talking about, like, oh, there's only a 1% chance, it's like, oh, no. No.
I agree. And I will say, love Jeremy Irons as Alfred. I think that's a really good idea. I thought Affleck was good as Batman. I really did. And I did not expect that, because I'm not really a big fan of his, but I thought he was cool, good enough as Batman. I love the look of Batman. I think this is my favorite sort of on-screen as far as trying to keep it closer to the comics.
The actual bat suit, yeah. I agree with that.
Yeah, it looks fucking awesome. Okay, again, Jesse Eisenberg, Doomsday, and Martha. Oh, boy.
Well, because
oh, boy.
Because the movie, like, with its title, Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, like, the sort of complicatedness of that title, I think, is mainly the movie's undoing. Because if you had really had more time devoted to sort of the first half of Batman v Superman, sure, that'd be fun. Maybe even keeping Wonder Woman in here, which this is the debut of Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, and at the time this was said, and I still agree as well, she's one of the huge highlights of the movie every time she shows up. Weirdly, the best sequences in this movie for me are kind of like just people talking in rooms as opposed to any of the actual Batman or Superman action stuff. Like the sequence where Clark Kent and Bruce Wayne meet each other at Lex's party. I love their back and forth. I love that dialogue. I love the whole thing going back just like, well, what about this Bat Vigilante, what he's doing? In the Daily Planet saying that kind of shit, hypocritical. Yeah, I hate fucking clowns in big elaborate colorful costumes.
Exactly. Really cool. I think I agree with you about adding the tagline Dawn of Justice, because you set yourself up for failure because everybody goes into it knowing like, oh, this is going to set up the Justice League. Like, there's no question that's what's going to happen. And as soon as Wonder Woman does come on screen, which I do agree with you, she's probably the shining light of the movie, and her action beats are fucking awesome. But that's what it's building towards. It's just sort of the sequel building towards the finale. Like, none of the stakes feel real. For a fact that Superman isn't fucking dead.
No,
and they try
right.
to force. I mean, it's so obvious, dude. And it feels lazy. It feels sort of, well, obviously too many hands in the pot, which we know is the case because Zack Snyder had to leave because of family reasons.
Well, no, that's not with this movie. That was with Justice League.
No, that was Justice League. Oh God, well, holy fuck.
No, because like here's no. Here's the thing. I think with this movie, it's more of the opposite problem of like Justice League and some of these other ones, where they gave Snyder this full reign, which feels weird given like even before this, like Man of Steel, despite like I think like broke even for them, wasn't like a huge hit, and even before this, like Sucker Punch or the Al Zakahul movie, all this other shit, weren't like movies that either lost them money or just barely made them any money. Post 300, he had a lot of those, and he was given these resources to keep continuing. And I think with Batman v Superman, it's way more of a problem of like there are too many sort of elements packed in here, as opposed to I think some of the lesser movies have the bigger problem of like there's barely any movie there, which is why I would say this isn't the worst one to me of the DCEU.
No, it's not. I agree.
I would prefer overstuff to completely thin on anything.
No, yeah, I completely agree with that. Well, what it sounds like to me, in all honesty, that's how easy I get these confused, these two fucking movies. But what it sounds like to me is like Snyder got a 3-picture deal. That's it. I guess that's all it could be.
Even the impetus for Man of Steel was just the fact that they were in the middle. Warner Brothers was in the middle of that lawsuit with the Schuster family, because it was like you might lose the rights to Superman if you don't put a movie in production immediately. And they're like, Zach, yoink, help us make a Superman movie.
But to give him credit, he was probably a pretty shrewd businessman about it. Be like, yeah, I'll do it, but you also got to let me do this and this too.
Right?
Why not? I would do the same thing if I was in his shoes. And the thing is, I don't think Zack Snyder is an incapable director. I really don't. I think Zack Snyder can film action pretty well. I do like a couple of his movies quite a bit. The thing is, his general tone does not work to me for the DC universe. It doesn't work. It's too dark. It's too gritty. It's too violent. It's too sort of foreboding and gothic and brooding. Like, it just doesn't work for me.
Yeah, I think it has the problem of like coming off of the Nolan movies, which were so big and successful. He's definitely kind of trying to be like, okay, I can achieve that same tone while also introducing more sort of like supernatural or over-the-top elements that would come from here. And I think that's the biggest problem is like Nolan, I know you have issues with those movies in particular, but it never felt like he kind of like introduced bigger, elaborate stuff he couldn't really handle with his tone. As opposed to especially in this movie, it's like we're going to have like this big, epic, serious Super Batman v Superman fight, but then also we're going to have wacky Lex Luthor and all this other shit that just doesn't fit.
Does this not feel like a mix between the Nolan sort of Batverse mixed with Watchmen?
I think, well, because the Watchmen problem comes with the fact that these movies are trying to psychoanalyze like both Batman and Superman as characters. Like a big influence was like essays even that were kind of like deconstructing Superman as a figure, and it's like that doesn't really work for like your second movie in the universe.
Don't need to psychoanalyze Superman as a character. You got enough of it in Man of Steel. Done. We know who he is. He's Superman. He's a thin character. Look, he's the ultimate Boy Scout. We get that, but that could be enough. You build the movie around that and make the surroundings and make him feel like a more important character around what's going on in the situation. Not everything has to have this sort of sense of tragedy and loss constantly intrinsically tied to the character. I understand, what they did with Man of Steel where he loses Jonathan and Kent and all this stuff, but then you don't need to see the Peter Parker talking to Uncle Ben scene, in this movie. Right. We know.
For all this thing about like, oh, we're trying to distance ourselves from Marvel, make our own thing, they also kind of steal elements like that from the Marvel universe, or even just, I think my biggest problem sort of with Superman as a character is how much they don't allow Henry Cavill to do much of anything. He has like literally about like 40 lines or so in the movie, 42 lines of spoken dialogue in the movie, and most of that is just like, Lois, you don't understand me, I don't get it. He treats both Superman and Batman as like really thinly similar characters I don't want to see fight, because they're both just kind of like, people don't understand me. And so...
No, 1,000% right. And instead of doing what we all know of the Batman character and have Batman have this conflict about Thomas and Martha, where he still talks to them and sees them and everything, and they make Superman do it. Until the end, where all of a sudden Batman can't deal with someone saying the name Martha. That sets him into oh my God, you're right. Oh, you are a good person. What the fuck are we talking about here? Is that how thin Batman's psyche is? Like, that's what it takes to make Batman stop? Just to say Martha? Like, this is so stupid and thin.
The Martha thing is one of many things in this movie where it feels like I'm watching the movie and saying, I'm seeing what you're going for, Zach. I get what you're trying to do. Yeah, but the problem is when you don't have like anybody kind of saying like, hey, that's kind of shitty. Instead you have like David Goyer or Chris Terrio saying like, I up. Let's do that.
That's all David Goyer fucking does. But no,
I don't know. To be fair, Chris Terrio also has shown, especially after this movie, he does a lot of that with like Rise of Skywalker and shit like that. He's also of equal guilty blame.
That's very true. But no, I agree with you. Like, I get what he's going for. I get that, Batman he sees him as human who has a mother and everything like that. So he's like, holy shit, this guy's infallible too. He's not this all-powerful sort of Christ figure allegory superhuman alien that doesn't have any regard for humanity. Like, I get the idea behind it. It was just handled with fucking just such reckless abandon. We're like, he's gonna kill him, and he says Martha. Oh my god, and that's it.
Right. Like, it turns Martha and also, I think, the Lois Lane characters in this movie into sort of these, like, really weird, like, mom-girlfriend complex kind of characters, where you have to make them, like, sort of the everything for these guys to, like, kind of relate it all to humanity. Is like, my mommy girlfriend or my girlfriend mommy are, like, the only things I have any kind of connection to. And it's just like, well, you're really disservicing, like, especially two, like, really talented actresses and turning them into both damsels in distress and also, like, the everything that they kind of want to, like, achieve for. Like, the object they want to, like, sort of go for. And it's like, you know, I love you so much, Lois, but I have to completely deny your request for me not to kill myself. I'm sorry, bye.
Well, yeah, they both become Chekhov's gun. I mean, they both do. They're only there to further the plot. I mean, and it's Martha Kent, nobody really cares about Martha Kent. Let's be 100% honest. But Lois Lane, that's what you're going to do to the Lois Lane character? Fuck off. Yeah. Like, it's so dumb. And again, I got to bring it up again. Eisenberg. All right. Lex Luthor is, Superman's Joker. Like, Batman has Joker, Superman has Lex Luthor.
Arch enemy. Number one enemy, yeah.
Number one of all time. If you really get into the lore and history of Lex Luthor, one of the smartest written characters ever. Because he is a fucking villain, but he's one of those classic villains where he believes what he's doing is right. And that makes such an interesting fucking character. It truly does. In this one, they basically turn him into the Riddler / Joker / a mad scientist. And that's his whole character arc. And it's such a weird sort of choice for Jesse Eisenberg's performance in it. I'm not saying Jesse Eisenberg as a whole, because he is a good actor. He can play sort of quiet and weird, understated performance. And this, he's so over the top and goofy and silly. It just doesn't work juxtaposed against everybody else in it who's playing it dead fucking serious and dour. He's so egregiously over the top and sort of distracting. It just doesn't work. I think he's a capable actor, but I don't think he's capable enough to where he goes against type and it's done well. It just comes across hokey to me.
Well, when I first heard that he was going to be Lex Luthor, I, like a lot of people, was taking a pause, like, that seems like a weird choice. But then I kept thinking about it, like, if you watch him in The Social Network, he is essentially playing, I think, the version of Lex Luthor you're talking about, just with the twist of it being he is a modern tech geek, which I think is an interesting update that would work for Lex Luthor, to have it be sort of like this sort of young genius, a Zuckerberg type, that would, like, come into all this, like, wealth and fame and all this other stuff, and he would be kind of a weirdo. I think, especially if you played, like, sort of like an Elon Musk type weirdo, where he's like, I'm trying to save everybody, but also I'll go on, like, Joe Rogan and smoke weed. Like, if he was more that guy, I think that would be an interesting kind of twist that would work really well for that character, but instead he becomes sort of like this conduit for Zack Snyder to have these long, like, rambling college freshman essays about, like, man and God, God and man gods. It's just really dumb.
It's so dumb. I don't know. It's just, that to me is one of the biggest egregious miscastings in the DCEU, if not the biggest. I would take Jared Leto's Joker over Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor. I really, truly would.
I won't go that far, because one at least isn't, like, covered in fucking, like, Axe body spray and talking about honka in the Jim Carrey voice.
I know.
Like, I don't think it's a miscasting thing. I just think it's a very poorly written version of, like we mentioned, like, a pretty cool idea.
Okay, I'll give you that. I'll give you that. But then you could say the same thing about Jared Leto's Joker. It's not really, because Jared Leto is a very capable actor.
It's not. It's not an idea, though. It's just like, Joker's a cholo. Anything else about him? No. I'll go into Suicide Squad more later. But I would at least say there is some kind of an idea behind, like, the Lex Luthor Jesse Eisenberg character that I could see potentially working at all, which makes it, like, that's not high praise at all, but that's at least mildly better than no idea stuff that would come later. And I think, honestly, like, the point where this movie falls apart for me really is the Senate meeting scene.
Yes.
Because I think that we haven't mentioned much about, like, Holly Hunter, who's one of 10,000 characters in the movie. But as this senator who was trying to, like, hunt down Superman after everything that happened. Not a bad idea. could be interesting to have Superman kind of confront this. They turn it into like the Senate meeting scene where you would have the perfect opportunity to have Superman speak his piece, not have him mope around and just be kind of a like fucking Charlie Brown kid, just going like Christmas time as he like fucking floats above. He's like in fucking Arrested Development. He's just like sadly floating around.
No, this would be fucking Hallelujah again, because Zack Snyder loves that goddamn song.
No, that's true. But like instead of like you could have given like this version of Superman an opportunity to say his piece, say some kind of regret, or speak about like why this collateral damage happened, anything like that. And they literally have fucking Scoot McNairy in a lead-lined wheelchair per the extended edition, blow everything up, and then he just walks away sadly and like saves a couple people, I guess.
With a jar of piss on the desk, by the way.
Right.
Let's not forget.
Right, because that was Lex Luthor's plan. It's such like it's the point where like any of the positive things I've said about the movie completely blow up with that wheelchair. Completely. Pretty much.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I definitely agree. Because there is some cool shit in it, like Bruce Wayne in the underground fight club thing. He is doing detective stuff and reconnaissance and all that. They're trying. They're really trying to do some cool shit. And then it just goes off the fucking rails, where he's getting the spear, he builds the suit, they have this long, drawn-out fight scene, the can you bleed thing and all this. And like I said, Martha switches it around to where all of a sudden they unify to fight this fucking Doomsday that looks like a fucking, like, a Goomba from the Mario Brothers movie. It's horrible looking. Basically, the climax of the film makes the preceding fucking 2 hours not matter.
Right, because it's trying to rush so much about, like you mentioned, like the death of Superman stuff with like Doomsday and all that. That feels like, why are we rushing to this? Why are we having like also the Dark Knight Returns element of it, and just like it, we're rushing to get like so many of these things in here. Not to mention all of the like little Easter eggs where Wonder Woman's like, let me click on this YouTube video link and find out about this, or the dream sequence that happens about like the fucking parademons and like. Which is all just like sequel setup for like a Justice League thing that didn't initially happen, but then I guess we'll get.
Yeah, we're getting it.
I guess.
I guess.
Did I want Mad Bat Fury Road? No, I didn't.
This just feels like a piss poor. I don't know, man. Like obviously it's not the jumping off point, but it feels like a very, very bland sort of second film in this universe. Like it's really.
I think bland is not the right descriptor for it. It's kind of just like
bland might not be the right word. It's not bland. There's a lot going on.
Like imagine if in the MCU of it all, if right after the first Iron Man, instead of doing like the other people having their own movies and all this other stuff, you followed it up with like Age of Ultron
or Infinity War.
Well, no, Infinity because like Age of Ultron is one of the bigger examples, like a sort of meld of like maybe Age of Ultron, like Iron Man 2. Like this has all the problems like an Iron Man 2 universe building times 10 because they're stuffing too much into it.
Right. Well, I think that's kind of what I mean when I said Infinity War, to where all of a sudden they throw everything into this movie for the most part. It's basically almost a Justice League movie, basically, and they throw it all in here for no reason. Like we did not need to see his little fucking icons in the computer to set up the other characters. Not necessary.
No,
really not necessary. And it's too much thrown, and whatever like didn't stick, they picked up and put back in anyways. And it's not, like I said, bland was not the right word. You're right, but there's a lot in this. It's a little overbearing.
It's overstuffed. That's its real big sin.
Yeah.
Is that it's overstuffed. Which, like I said, comparing to some of like the other, I think, worser movies that would come out after this, like at least it's not thin. At least there's just like some substance here that you can find amongst the rubble. And in a way that like I get why there are fans of something like this, because it's a big, ambitious, daring superhero movie that isn't doing the exact same thing Marvel's doing, but at the same time it has just this problem like it doesn't have the cohesion. Like say what you will about Marvel kind of having cookie cutter stuff. I've had that complaint before with some of those movies feel kind of familiar, but at the same time at least like it doesn't feel like they're fucking up the formula with that. This feels just like we're putting way too many different ingredients in the pot, and it's not going to taste that consistent or good.
I agree. It's pressure cooker chili. with no spices.
It's some white ass pressure cooker chili.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, good lord! We've talked a lot about this movie, Adam. Why don't you go ahead and spin off some final thoughts about BVS, as the kids call it?
It's just, to me, this is a huge misstep. There's some good in it, a lot more bad. There's some glaring sort of defects and egregiously almost offensive things to fans of the comic books and fans of the lore in this that I just can't get behind it. I try to separate it and look at it like it's a film, and as a film, it feels overstuffed and bloated. As a comic book fan, it feels like fan service done the wrong way. It's a really sort of bloated mess of a film that makes choices, some of them daring, but I'd argue mostly all of them wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I really do sort of agree with that. It might sound like I'm defending this movie to some degree, and I think it's only because I can at least say that, like, there's a bit more ambition than here that makes me respect, if not like, this movie that much. Because it's like, it's trying to do a lot, and I think, like, it gets to sort of the disrespectful element of it, especially during that climax. I think just a lot of the ways that they treat some of, like, the female characters, and some of the ways it just kind of treat the basic core tenets of these characters and turn them into much more sort of, like, over-the-top kind of archetypes, while at the same time trying to, like, be philosophical about their inner meaning, I think is kind of, like, it's this weird kind of, like, pulling at two different masters, where it's like, let's really analyze Batman and Superman in a way that none of the other movies have done before. But also, let's build a universe about these characters you're supposed to get invested in. And it's like, guys, this is like putting the batters in at the wrong end. It's not going to work. That's really not going to fucking work and make this go. And I think, yeah, I agree. Once it gets to especially the sort of death of Superman stuff, and when it gets to everybody kind of mourning this version of Superman, it feels like it's not even just a thing of, like, you're misunderstanding the character overall. It feels like you're misunderstanding the character you built up in these, like, other movies. Where it's just like, right, where it's like, sure, he like saved us from Doomsday, but I don't know if everyone would be so even like divided about, like, who fucking Superman is at this point. It's just like, yeah, he saved us from Doomsday, but also, like, how many more people are dead than there were previously? Right. And it's such a bummer that, like, some of the, like, really good stuff, like, we didn't even mention, like, my favorite sort of moment in this whole movie is even during the middle of that really shitty climax. Like, the one sort of consistent thing into the second half of the movie is Gal Gadot coming in with that Hans Zimmer, like, guitar riff, because it's like, that's fun. That's kind of fun. And it's kind of silly, but, like, fuck it, I'm entertained now. Which is like, great, just kick the big Ninja Turtle turd's ass, Wonder Woman, you go, girl. Finally, breathe some life into this. But yeah, just overall, it's a huge, massive mess of a movie, which makes it not the worst one of these DC movies, but the one that's making the biggest swing and the biggest miss.
Yeah, I think that's 100% accurate.
But that's the end of our two features. Us talking about those for the evening. But we have some other stuff to get to, including our picking for next week. Stay tuned for that at the very end of the show. But we also ask every Monday over at DEDB Pod on Facebook and Twitter about, like, hey, what are your favorite or least favorite movies or elements of a franchise you're talking about or whatever that we're covering for that particular week. So we asked you all about the DCEU, and we had a fair amount of feedback here. First off, we'll start with some friends of the show, like Caitlin Turner, who says for the DCEU, the best films are Birds of Prey and Wonder Woman. The worst are Batman v Superman and Justice League. James Rodriguez says, Wonder Woman is the introduction deserving of the character right down to the exceptional No Man's Land sequence. Shazam manages to balance these superpowered joys with the darker reality so exquisitely. Aquaman could have used some fine-tuning, especially with its overlong runtime and that awful Pitbull rap, but still, it was very enjoyable. Worst, Suicide Squad. Whether through studio interference or not, this was an all-out disaster. And Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, how do you make the live-action uniting of two icons so boring and inept? Getting grim-dark enthusiast Zack Snyder to direct it, that's how. Tori DePina says, the worst elements of the DCEU are people like Zack Snyder providing a weak foundation for a film universe in both Man of Steel and a significantly worse BVS. There's no humanity or even trace amounts of what makes the characters great, either of those movies. And the best elements are people like Patty Jenkins, Kathy Yan, David F. Sandberg, and James Wan, who managed to put some life and color into the universe, even if people like Snyder learn nothing from it. Christian Alvarez says the best of DC's current movies continuity is Wonder Woman. Patty Jenkins and Gal Gadot did a good job of bringing an iconic character to the big screen for the first time, with some consistently great character moments. Shazam did a good job of bringing the character to life despite DC's complicated history with Shazam as a character. And Birds of Prey took advantage of the great casting for Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn and made a fun movie out of it that I'm excited to see a follow-up for. The worst of the current DC crop has a couple big ones. Suicide Squad's triple production issues coupled with Jared Leto's method acting issues make me very curious about a book or documentary about this misfire. BVS Dawn of Justice should have been a home run, meaning of DC's two most iconic characters, and it became such a botched attempt thanks to a director that seems to have little to no interest in understanding these characters and create essentially the Phantom Menace of the 2010s. Hopefully going forward, DC will make smarter adapting decisions for these characters, and Zack Snyder's big boy cut of Justice League will be the last chapter of this odd tenure. Rachel Hillis says, best, Shazam, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Birds of Prey, and portions of Suicide Squad. Worst, basically anything from their versions of Batman or Superman. Brian Kane says, I think this continuity was a mistake and needs to be axed entirely. Wonder Woman stands out as the only above-average entry for me, and Aquaman isn't saved by its overwhelming goofiness. Almost everything about this franchise is half-baked and embarrassing. And then Jesus says, the worst elements of the franchise are the movies themselves and the nerd uproar that comes from mediocre films that don't deserve any amount of discourse. The best element is Henry Cavill's upper lip, the most entertaining part of all the films, and I mean from both DCEU or Marvel.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think it's kind of unanimous on most of those, what people think are the bad and what people think are the good. The thing is about Zack Snyder, I do agree that I don't know that he should have been sort of given the reins. But I think like a Zack Snyder Batman movie could have worked with the dark and the gloominess and things like that. I think if they were going to give him one, Batman might have been the character for him, or even something kind of weird like a new Green Lantern movie or something like that. But for him to sort of have the reins over the whole franchise as it started, I do think was a misstep. And yeah, I think Suicide Squad is just a jumbled mess. I'm very hard pressed. The only good things in it are Margot Robbie's really good, of course, and I hate that I'm even saying this, but Jai Courtney as Cat Boomerang is really fun in it too.
Rewatching it, especially I actually watched the extended cut version of that for the first time, which doesn't really add a lot. It's like 10 minutes of extra footage. When I first watched it in theaters, I was just like, well, this is bad, but I didn't dislike as much as Batman v Superman. And then watching it again, it may be just one of the worst movies I've ever seen, regardless of like comic books or not.
Oh, wow.
Because like with the BVS we talked about, that's just like a really bloated, like super long, over saturated script. Justice League as it currently stands kind of feels like it's an outline stretched to a movie, and then Suicide Squad feels to me like an elevator pitch stretched out to a movie. Like there's like barely anything in it. It's such like a completely vapid, lacking of anything for most of those characters to do kind of movie, despite the fact that it like stretches on for 2 hours. It's so just like, what's even happening? They're just people standing around making really bad jokes at each other, or trying to do this David Ayer pseudo like, oh man, we're badass criminal types, like look how interesting we are as like bad boy archetypes or bad girl archetypes with Harley Quinn. And it's just like you have like these actors, some of which are pretty talented. Even Jai Courtney, I agree, it's one of his better performances, but it's just like they turn them into fucking action figures. They just stand around and they like fight some of the most uninteresting sort of like villain henchmen ever with these putty guys. And Enchantress has like it's an incomplete movie. There are reels missing is what it feels like. It's just like this is not a movie. Go back, do your assignment again, fuck off. And I don't want a David Ayer cut, because I'm sure like it'll be a movie that makes more sense, but it'll just be even more obnoxious. But like even the one character that has an arc with like the fire guy, the Pyro or whatever his fucking name is, like his sort of
God, I don't remember. El Diablo.
El Diablo. His motivations of being like, oh man, I wish I could go back to the wife I killed so she could like go down on me.
Yes.
It's such a sick, misogynistic, stupid, shitty fucking movie.
Also, I got my family now, essay. Really? Like
Yeah.
in 5
Right,
minutes?
which some of that is like the studio interference with the reshoots and shit, but also just even
Sure.
like even the stuff that feels more close to like Ayer's usual style, which I'm not historically a fan of. It's like a movie that's big energy that's sort of fueling it is fire fueled by like an Axe body spray can.
I think your elevator pitch idea is dead on, and the pitch to me feels like, okay, so people liked Guardians of the Galaxy as a gang of misfits with this hip soundtrack. Let's do that.
But they're bad guys. It's what they do.
Yeah, bad girls. Yeah, it's really piss poor, dude. My kid and I have been doing movie nights recently. Like, she wanted to do superhero movies, so I was like, all right, I'll show her Aquaman, Shazam, so, and she really liked them. And then I watched Green Lantern with her, with Ryan Reynolds, even though it's not part of the DCEU. But that's a better movie than Suicide Squad.
Yeah.
And that's saying a lot, because that's a bad movie. Yeah, at least Green Lantern has a beginning, middle, and an end. Like, there's a point to it.
There's a structure, and also like I can see more things. Like we didn't talk much about in BVS about how there's like a lot of like murky cinematography, especially during the fight sequences. But Suicide Squad has that so beat where it just feels like, did you
So
like try and sneak onto the Warner Brothers lot and film things, and you couldn't turn on the lights? Right, and even there's been so much around Justice League, obviously. And I remember also at the time thinking like, well, I didn't dislike this as much as Batman v Superman, but rewatching it again, that's also barely a movie. Like, there's so many points where it changes tone from, like, shot to shot in a single scene. To the point where it's just like, this is, like, a Frankenstein monster that I just want to, like, put out of its misery as opposed to watch.
I do agree with you, but I still think it's more watchable than Suicide Squad.
Yeah. It has Gal Gadot kind of doing something. So that...
Yeah, it's got Gal Gadot, and it's got Jason Momoa, who is fun as Aquaman. I think he's really fun, even though my man and all that stuff. But, and you get Jeremy Irons, you get Bruce Wayne with a little bit more levity to him, which does work. It's just the movie's a mess. The thing is about the DCU, they tried too hard, too fast to replicate what Marvel had done. And by the time they started, Marvel had already been, fucking 6-8 years in?
Yeah.
So they were trying to, catch up super fast, and that's obviously what happened. That's obviously what the case is with most of these movies. Like, they just wanted to pump them out. Not enough time and care was given, not only for the source material, but for the fans and the general movie-going audience. They relied just on a name.
And also not a lot of confidence in their filmmakers, because after those movies, particularly with a Justice League, obviously as was very well documented about the Joss Whedon stuff. You say the levity thing, that's what they're going for, but most of the jokes don't work for me at all in Justice League.
I agree with you, they don't. But at least the whole movie's not this brooding bullshit. At least you can see a glimmer of where they might go with it.
To me, it feels kind of like the worst of both worlds with that, though, in terms of the light optimism feels so corny and shoved in, and all of the big dark brooding stuff feels insincere at the same time. I think it's the worst of both potential halves. The only time I can give you credit for is a moment that feels oh, this is kind of an interesting, hopeful moment, is I think what feels like a Whedon moment, but I think it's one of the better examples, is when the Flash is super scared about actually trying to save people from Steppenwolf, and Batman just says, save one person. That's a great moment in the middle of this nothing of a movie.
Great scene, I agree. But then why did they make Ezra Miller run like that? What was the point of that? But the thing is, I'd rather have the half-cocked sort of levity to a 4-hour brood fest like we're going to get.
Right, which we've referenced the Snyder Cut element of it, which we've talked about this off mic. The only reason that's happening is just because Warner Brothers can't really shoot much of anything. And they're well, how about we get something that has a few reshoots to do and is mostly effects driven that we have to pay money for, and we'll put that on HBO Max, a subscription service we need more attention toward. And this was before even they did their recent announcement about hey, theaters and on HBO Max at the same time, and upset the entire film community.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, I mean, let's just call it as the DCEU as a whole is kind of a mess. Yeah, I mean, it really is. Like I said, I love Aquaman. I do like Man of Steel for the potential of what it could have gone into, but it didn't. But I still like it. The visuals and stuff like that, and the design of Krypton and even Russell Crowe and all that. I really do like it.
Yeah, even with to speak to Aquaman, what I like about Aquaman is that's a very messy movie that I have a lot of problems with, but also it has such a consistent, energetic, fun tone that makes me sort of well, some of this stuff doesn't work for me, but also Patrick Wilson says he's the Ocean Master and fights the Brine King, voiced by Brian Blessed. That's fun. That's weird, stupid shit I kind of think is fun.
Julie Andrews is that giant fucking creature.
Right, which I love that she voices Cthulhu, and that came out the same week as Mary Poppins Returns, which she declined to be in.
I know. But no, I like Aquaman. I like Shazam. I like Birds of Prey. And I think Suicide Squad's going to be a big win. I think, from what I've heard, Wonder Woman 84 is going to be a big win.
You mean specifically The Suicide Squad, James Gunn's The Suicide Squad.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, my bad.
Right, yes. I mean, I agree with that. I think to speak to you were talking earlier, the best two I would still agree are Shazam and Wonder Woman. I think Shazam does, like, all the fun stuff of, like, especially, like, sort of an 80s kids movie where there's a bit of danger that's there, but also, like, a consistent fun to all the characters. And honestly, I will say it's one of the rare superhero movies, period, where my favorite thing is the third act. Like, usually we have that problem with the third act in these movies, where it's just like, yeah, it's kind of paint by numbers, hero fights villain, I don't care. And the third act is so charming and heartwarming with, like, his foster family coming together. Like, when I watched that in the theater, it's just like, this is, like, magical. I feel like a kid again watching this. It's so good. It's so warm-hearted and earnest in a way that you don't get it from a lot of these movies. And even with, like, Wonder Woman, like, I mostly really love that movie. Revisiting it, especially the first time since the theater recently, I forgot just how much it feels like this perfect meld of modern superhero action stuff, but also like a classic Hollywood movie. Like, I love the chemistry so much between Gal Gadot and Chris Pine, and that team they kind of build up has like an interesting, diverse angle to it, but also all those characters feel really well realized. And if it didn't have fucking David Thewlis turning into an Injustice villain, it would be a perfect movie to me.
And I would have totally down for Ares being the villain. He's a major villain for Wonder Woman and everything, but it's so poorly done. Like, it's so silly. It's almost a perfect movie for me. I do have a couple issues with Wonder Woman, but Shazam edges it out just slightly. But it is definitely my number two.
The moment where I watched that movie and I knew, like, Gal Gadot is a star that's here to stay is the bit where, like, she gets the ice cream and she licks and she's like, oh, it's wonderful. You should be so proud. She's like, that's so awesome and cute and great.
And it makes sense.
Yes. I would argue Gal Gadot in general in that casting but it's just like one of those once in like a sort of decade castings for me, like Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man or before that Chris Reeve as Superman, which is like I can't see anybody else as his character. It's perfect.
When I first heard it was Gal Gadot, the only thing I knew her from was the Fast and the Furious movies.
Right, where she's just like kind of a nothing arm candy for Han.
Yeah, I was like, what? That's Wonder Woman? Man, as soon as she showed up in Batman vs Superman, I'm like, oh, I get it. The thing is, Gal Gadot pulled off this really sort of nuanced performance of A, exceptional beauty and allurement. I mean, she's one of the most beautiful I've ever seen. But B, this authoritative sort of personality, and just like, she is not the person with whom to fuck.
But also, she doesn't sacrifice any vulnerability at the same time.
At all. It's such a well-done performance. I think she's absolutely perfect.
Just credit also to Patty Jenkins, though, because I think that movie works so well because she kind of takes vague influences of Snyder's kind of like slow-motion stuff and does it thousands of times better. Like, it was said here about No Man's Land. Completely agree. It's like such an awesome... It gave me chills still, like, when she gets onto that clock tower and bursts it, just like, fuck yeah, this is great. This is such awesome shit.
I think if it wasn't in the hands of a female director, I don't think the movie would have been as successful, to be honest.
And I guess before we kind of close out here on that particular feedback, how do you sort of feel about like what the future can be for the DCEU? Because it's kind of in a weird spot right now. Where do you feel like it can kind of go from here?
Obviously, do the sequels to the ones that you've already done, like Wonder Woman 84. Totally excited for it. Really excited if they do actually do the Shazam sequel, which I think they're going to do because Black Adam's coming and all that stuff. But I think a really good idea for them to do is keep sort of the ties of the DCU we've already established, but do the one-shot movies, like with Joker or the Robert Pattinson Batman and stuff like that. I think that's a really smart play. So you can still have your extended universe, but you can still make other movies that don't have to be part of the universe.
As much as like Henry Cavill got such a raw deal, I would still want to see like a good Superman movie with that dude. I think he has the potential to be such a great Superman. They just rarely gave him the chance.
Looks like Superman. I mean, he genuinely like an artist's drawing of Superman in the flesh. And he's a decent actor. I would love to see another Cavill-led Superman film. Will it happen? I don't know. I mean, honestly, the odds are probably against it, but I think it'd be cool.
There was even that rumor like earlier this year that he was going to be kind of like the Hulk and like show up in other movies or something like that. It's just like, I don't know if we need to have him do that necessarily.
No, not with Superman. Not with Superman. Superman's too big.
I mean, to be fair, I also would have loved to see him at the end of Shazam actually instead of the double. That would have been even funnier if just Henry Cavill sat down. It's just like, you guys like this milk?
With the lunch. Milk with your bones and then like pulled a Mr. T. Eat your vitamins, drink your milk. Like that's awesome. But yeah, I think, my thing is they're never going to match the MCU. It's not going to happen. I mean, it's just not going to. But they have potential with these, like I said, with these one-offs, like Pattinson's the Batman. How excited are people for that? Very. Do that. Joker's an Academy Award-winning film. Say what you will about it, but it was super successful for DC. Do those.
Yeah, or even do a good solo Flash movie and maybe get rid of Ezra Miller.
Oh, no, I think you absolutely have to get rid of Ezra Miller.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a necessity. Adam, we have one other brief bit of feedback that's not related to the DCEU stuff, but I think it's going to warm your heart, because we asked people out there after Man's Best Friend where you felt so alone. And we're just asking, you were like the sad Superman, just like, does anybody else like Man's Best Friend? I think I'm the only one. Well, Oliver Sloan, loyal fan of ours, did mention that he said, I love Man's Best Friend, the only dog who you don't have to use a pooper scooper for, and he has acid pee. No cleanup necessary.
Oh, Oliver. I love you. You beautiful man. We should get married and have a Man's Best Friend themed wedding. Lance Henderson, you could piss on the cake.
The cake is shaped like Max the dog.
Like, yeah. Chewing on brake lines.
And I'll just be there like, can I have like the non-pea side of the cake? I'd prefer that. But thank you all for all of that feedback. We also want to say some thanks and congratulations to some other people, including just, we're releasing this the second to last week of December, and Christmas is this week, and Hanukkah was last week. Kwanzaa will be later this week. There's a bunch of different holidays. Happy holidays, everybody out there, no matter what you celebrate.
Yeah, for sure. Happy holidays. Enjoy them safely. Let's hope this can be a sort of fucking new beginning for everyone. Not necessarily because of the COVID thing. I mean, of course, that too. But everybody's going through this shit right now. Let's hope this can be a fresh start for everyone.
Let's hope things are just dark now before the dawn. Come 2021. Knock on any wood that's available. Where's a tree? Let me knock on that too.
I don't have anything made of wood. I'm cursed.
Oh, no. Well, we want to thank some other people too, obviously, like Chris Oliver, who does the intro and outro music used in our show. Listen to more of his music at chrisoliver.bandcamp.com. Thanks to Emily Scarter for the art for our show. And thanks to our loyal edgelord supporters on Patreon, on patreon.com/GEDBpod. You can, if you just donate $1 a month, participate in some stuff like polls that we put out and listen to some bonus episodes. For this particular week, we'll be putting out a poll for a topic we'll be doing next month. And, next month we had like some empty slots in January, and we're like, how about we spend one of those revisiting a topic we haven't done in a long ass time? Because we like at least repeating a topic once so we can sort of switch off on the quality and stuff. And there are two we definitely wanted to revisit. So you all get to choose either if we do Stephen King adaptations, which we haven't done since episode 12. Adam. So long ago. And also spoof films, which you haven't done since episode 34, both in the first year we did this in 2018. So you all get to decide if you just donate the $1 a month, which one of those we do, and you can vote from the 23rd, and that lasts a week for you to vote. Anyone you're pulling for, Adam, between those two?
I mean, I'm good with either. I'm guessing Stephen King's going to win. Just because it's more popular, and plus with the Stand miniseries coming out and things like that, I'm guessing it's going to be Stephen King. But I'm down for either.
Mm-hmm. And also, speaking of bonus stuff, we'll soon be recording our new entry in the trivia game. That'll be our last bonus episode for 2020, where we'll be joined by a third guest. So we'll be recording that soon. And if all things go well, I should have that in time for Xmas. So you can all gather around the tree and listen to Adam and I probably get our ass kicked by the third guest in the new trivia game we're doing.
Swear and swear.
Listen with the kids, especially just like right after Santa's presents are open. Hear Adam swear around the fire. A new Christmas tradition.
Yes.
Yes. But if you want more of our antics, you can find us at DEDV Pod, Twitter and Facebook. That's where every Monday we share our feelers about like, hey, what are the good or bad things you feel for this particular topic we're doing. And you can also submit feedback to us via email at doubleedgeddoublebill, all spelled out, at gmail.com. And you know what, Adam? It might be a bit too late to get certain Christmas gifts ordered online, but you could always have something just in time for the new year with over at TeePublic, the ESO store over there. So tpublic.com/store/the-ESO-broadcasting.network. There'll be a link in the description if you didn't quite get all that. You can buy merchandise for any of the ESO shows, including ours. I mentioned I got a coffee cup recently with our logo on it. That's great. I've been drinking coffee out of it all week. And also I got a mask so I can stay safe during the holiday season, and also plug Double Edge Double Bill out there. It's quite comfortable and easily breathable.
Yeah, buy our merch. Buy our merch.
For sure on there, and we get a bit of commission off it. So it helps out.
Yeah, I mean, what the hell? It's Christmas, guys. Help us out.
It's Christmas!
It's Christmas!
And you can find me doing my own individual stuff on Twitter, Instagram, or Letterboxd at Not the Who's Tommy, where I post up some feelings on there about movies and stuff. I also do some writing at marianithomas.wordpress.com, where I'm sure very soon I'll be having a review for Wonder Woman 1984, and I'm probably going to have one for Soul, the new Pixar movie that'll be coming out on Disney Plus that same day, Christmas Day.
Excited for that one, actually, more than Wonder Woman.
And also, I did a guest appearance this very week. It'll be coming out on friend of the show, Rafe Telsh's podcast, Have Not Seen This, where we talk about a movie that I'm surprised people might not have seen. And I brought to the table Muppets Take Manhattan, which I think is sort of the underrated gem of especially the earlier Muppet movies.
It's my absolute favorite one of the franchise. Yeah, absolutely great movie.
Wait till I tell the guys at marketing.
Ooh. And yeah, if you're trying to find me anywhere, I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Atom or Adam. It's ATOM_ADAM. I don't do a lot on there. A lot of pictures of beers, a lot of pictures of paintings I've done, and a lot of random 2 to 3 a.m. Twitter musings. And I will share your shit.
He's a loyal retweeter, as they say.
That's about it.
Yes, and if you want more loyalty from us, you can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and other podcasting platforms out there. And if you're listening on the ESO network, why not listen to all the other great shows? Or you can even dig into our archives for stuff we posted even before we were on ESO, over on our Podbean main feed. And if nothing else, if you can't, buy our merch or support us on the Patreon, we get it. You can support us for completely free if you just rate, review, or just share the show around. It helps us get more visibility out there on the internets.
That's all it takes, man. Just hit the retweet button. Not that hard.
All it takes, yes. And now, Adam, before we finally finish this episode, we have one more episode left in this miserable year of 2020. One more to go before we dawn into the new 2021 year. Thank God.
Yeah. Oh, for God's sakes.
Hopefully, like we said, knocking on that wood, hopefully it's better from here. But before we leave 2020, we have to do what we usually do every year, which is in the middle of the year, and then at the very end, we talk about movies that came out in 2020, which obviously, given this year, was an interesting sort of release strategy for a lot of movies. A lot of streaming, interesting ones that could come about. And this time, unlike last time when we did this, I have the good picks, you have the bad picks. I have 2 assigned number between 1 and 10, and you've done the same for your bad picks. And as we do every week, we will pick a number between 1 and 10 for each other's choices, and that gets us closer to whatever good and bad choice we do. So, Adam, for my 2 good picks, number between 1 and 10.
Let's go number 1.
Okay. I have a movie that'll be very close to number 1. I think when I finally do my sort of top movies of 2020 list. Time loop comedy Palm Springs, starring Andy Samberg on Hulu.
Oh, I haven't watched that one yet. Cool. I'm excited to check that one out. For sure. That's cool. That's exciting.
And then at number 9, I had another one that I think is going to be one of my tip-top favorites. One that I hope more people see. Honestly, it's a sort of weird documentary on Netflix called Dick Johnson is Dead, which is a female filmmaker tries to make a movie in tribute to her father, who is kind of starting to suffer from dementia and stuff, and involves shooting a bunch of scenarios where it looks like he gets murdered.
Oh, good lord.
It's a very delightful, heartwarming movie, despite that premise.
Huh. All right. Well, you know what? I will watch them both. That's probably not true.
Probably not true, no. But you will at least watch Palm Springs and The Bad Choice that we'll be picking here, Adam. From your two bad choices, I'm going to go with number 6.
All right. I think this is the first time I've done this. Had a choice twice come up knowingly. I tend to try not to replicate. But this is one that I feel like got, as we talked about with Birds of Prey, sort of an unfair shake. At number 8, I have The New Mutants.
Oh, the infamous New Mutants. Okay, I have not seen this yet, so this will be very curious to finally dig into this movie that's been 75 years in the making. I can't wait.
Right, exactly. And at number 1, I had Capone with Tom Hardy.
Ooh, yeah, pretty bad one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Never watched it, but that's what I've heard.
No, okay, there will be more to talk about, I think, with New Mutants. That'll be interesting. Okay, so New Mutants and Palm Springs. That's how we're ending 2020, everybody. Get ready, get hyped. Coming next time. I guess it's time to do our farewells, everybody. So until next time, remember, always connect this holiday season with your Marthas.
Yes. Happy holidays, you fucks.
Why'd you say that name? Good night.
This has been a broadcast of the ESO Network. Be part of the crew and help support our shows by donating to our ESO Patreon or by shopping at the TeePublic store, which can all be found at www.esonetwork.com. The ESO Network, your station for all things geek.